Hi everyone, so just in time before the Season 25 launch, I want to give you an updated overview of all the soul shards that you can find, what to look out for, how they work, and just to give you a bit of an idea of what to look for. So I already made a first impressions video on the PTR when it first launched, like a month ago, and talked about them and explained them a little bit, but a few things have changed, and also not all of them are really that important. So there are a few key shards that you really need to keep an eye on, and also the different random stats you can get, where you might be wondering like what is the best. So if you're not really aware yet, these are the soul shards. So this will be the Season 25 theme. They will drop pretty much like candy everywhere, and especially from bosses they will drop more often, which is basically almost the entire time you're farming, because in Greater Rifts only bosses exist that drop any kind of loot. So you get a lot of them. So there are 4 of them that can be socketed into a weapon, there are 3 of them that can be socketed into helms, and they have extremely powerful abilities. They all come with the fixed rank 0 ability, and they can be upgraded up to rank 3. Now this is the rank 0 Essence of Anguish, for example, which is like one of the main weapon shards. This one gives you extra cooldown reduction, move speed, and then there's some other like secondary effects that you unlock at rank 3, and I'll show that all in a second here. So these are all the different variations. If you take the same shard and you upgrade it to rank 1, it looks like this. So you get all the basic flawless royal gem effects. So in this case, on a weapon shard you get the ruby, emerald, whatever, like life per hit, damage, crit damage, etc. There's a bit of like a random stat range on these, so they go slightly higher than usual. So something like, I think 150% crit damage is the maximum, and 25% elite damage. So it goes a bit higher, but not really such a big deal. Now when you upgrade it to rank 2, you get another extra random stat on top of the other things. So in this case you can see this holy skills damage here. So that's one of those random stats you can get on a weapon shard. You can see all of them here if you like. So there is basically all the different elements you can roll. Then there's a up to 50% local damage increase, and there's attack speed and crit chance. So attack speed is usually only something for support characters. Crit chance is absolutely terrible for basically every build. And then almost every time you want to go with the elemental effect on your weapon, especially for dual wielding builds, because the other effects, especially the percent damage, buff only the weapon itself. For builds that have only one weapon equipped and no like mojo or source or something like that in the offhand, you can also go with this 50% local damage increase, but in almost every case it's still weaker, at least by a little margin compared to the elements. On the Helm shards you have a similar effect. So this is the Sliver of Terror, which is like the #1 Helm shard for almost every build. And here you get all the flawless royal gem effects as well. You get the cooldown, resource, life, etc. that you can usually socket in your helm. And then at rank 2 you get another extra stat again, just like on a weapon. So in this case you have mainstat, vitality, armor, and auras. You basically always want to avoid these, they have really low values. And then there's missile and melee reduction. So those are extremely good defensively. They give you up to like 20% reduction against those types. Very good. Vitality is kind of alright on some squishy builds, otherwise main stat if you want to go for the offensive option. Now finally, when you upgrade your shard to rank 3, you get another legendary effect. Each shard has 3 different special effects at rank 3. So you always have this base effect, then you have the stats, then you have this random stat, and then you have this extra effect. And in this case this is the death blow spread effect here. So this is the second to last point. So I will show you all of them quickly. So it's typically where you have a little bit of an RNG factor in this upgrade process, because not all of those secondary legendary effects are really useful for every build, and you definitely want to target the right ones. So it won't really be such a big deal to get like one that has like the right stats. I mean, typically for the rank 1 upgrade it doesn't really matter, it's just like a bit of, you know, variance in the values. Then on the rank 2 upgrade you have this random stat, so of course if you get the wrong element you want to try again. And then after rank 3 you have this 1 in 3 chance after you hit the right second stat. Now how do you actually upgrade those gems? This is a material you only get in Season 25, which is a consumable similar to Ramaldni's gift, but it drops much more often. So I think we're gonna get something like between 2 and 5 per hour of those. So you will actually be able to upgrade those shards quite regularly, and it's not really gonna be such a big deal outside of like the first few hours of the season or so, when you're still kind of slow in farming and you don't get that many shards. But once you're like comfortably speed farming your GR 90, 100, 120, whatever you're gonna do with your character in like a fast pace, you're gonna get many of those, and you're gonna get many different shards, and you can definitely get the right combo. The neat part about this is that the shards that you don't actually want to use can be used for augments, similar to legendary gems in Season 25. So you can just stick them into the cube with an ancient item, and then you put in 3 Flawless Royal, whatever of main stat, and you can use them just like a regular legendary gem. A rank 0 soul shard gives you a rank 50 augment, and then it's plus 25 for each rank, so up to 125 augments, which is a massive amount of main stat. So make sure you use that. And you can also just throw in those rank 0 shards if you don't really want to waste your upgrade materials early on. Just throw them on your first items you get, because the shards definitely drop a lot more than the embers. So there's not really any harm in just putting them on your items. So you've already seen the Essence of Anguish. Here's the Sliver of Terror that you can see. And this is also probably the most important combo. This base effect here is the cooldowns are increased by 25%. This is actually minus cooldown reduction, so you need to roll more cooldown reduction on your items. And then for every skill on cooldown, you take 12.5% reduced damage and deal increased damage. So this was slightly nerfed on the last final patch notes. It's 12.5% increased damage now as well. But typically you're gonna see a pretty huge buff just from using this Terror Shard on most builds, because you almost always have something like 3 or 4 cooldown skills, and you want to face roll them a little bit more than usual. So to actually get this buff here, you get massive damage reduction. So this is actually the choice you're gonna make in almost every single build. The main rank 3 effect on the Sliver of Terror is the attack speed and crit chance are increased by 5%. This was also slightly nerfed in the final patch for each skill on cooldown. So you typically get something like 15% attack speed and crit chance, or even 20%, or even more in some cases. So this is really massive. Here's another version of the Ring of Terror, which has a Ring of Fire after killing 100 enemies. So this is used for solo pushing, especially for very weak builds. So builds that can't otherwise actually get anywhere close to GR 150. You will abuse this Ring of Fire as much as possible, because it can kind of slowly burn away elites. So you want to make like a large pull, have like 90 stacks, kill a few monsters, burn everything, pull everything into the Ring of Fire, and then you kind of chain those rings off themselves in like a really large map with like a massive density. So this is the basic idea here. Obviously this is extremely difficult to do and extremely RNG heavy, but for the builds that are like C tier, D tier, etc., we're probably going to see higher than usual clears because of this effect, because this scales similar to a coordinate pattern with the Great Rift tier you're doing. So essentially you can kind of cheat out a few more GR tiers with this Ring of Fire for some of the really weak builds, but for the most part you're going to be using this attack speed and crit bonus. There's also one that gives fire and lightning skill damage bonus up to 50%, which is pretty good. So especially for the builds that have these elements, you can use this one early on and then maybe focus more on your weapon shard to try to get like the right combo there. But later on you usually want to go with the attack speed and crit in almost every single case. The alternative in the Helm socket is the Shard of Hatred. This one gives you less damage when you have few targets around you, and more damage the more targets you have around you. So this is like some big AoE shard. Big advantage here is you don't get this minus cooldown reduction effect that you get from the Sliver of Terror. So in some cases this is actually very useful, and also for builds that simply don't use a lot of cooldown skills. So this usually applies to especially wizards that have almost no cooldown skills in most of their builds, because they have like magic weapon and storm armor and these kind of things. So you can't really replace those with more cooldowns to make the Sliver of Terror work. The main variation you want to use here is the one where you stack the damage higher. So the base effect is this, you deal 15% reduced damage, and then you have 10% increased damage per enemy to a maximum of 100%. This was also slightly nerfed to 5% up to 50% maximum. And the rank 3 effect essentially boosts the rank 0 effect by giving you a higher maximum. So this was also slightly nerfed to 10% increased per enemy up to 100% bonus. So for AoE builds this is extremely good, but for the most part Sliver of Terror is still going to rule, especially because on the weaker builds you have the Ring of Fire, or you also just get this extra attack speed and crit damage, which outweighs the bonus they can get here. But as I mentioned, if you don't really have any cooldown skills in your build and you have kind of okay single target damage to actually not fight a Rift Guardian for like 8 minutes, then this is usually the go-to choice here. There are other secondary effects that you can get at rank 3. So here you can pull enemies together when you kill an elite pack. There's nothing really interesting. And then you have this movement speed bonus. So this is something you can usually stick into some T16 builds here and there to get 50% movement speed, where you don't really care about losing a bit of damage. Here's the Fragment of Destruction. This is the last of the Helm shards. The rank 0 effect is the bottom one here, so this essentially gives you illusory boots. And then you have also a Messerschmitt kind of proc, so you walk through enemies, you apply this mark, and when they die you get the Messerschmitt proc. So this is kind of nice, especially for support characters. There is maybe a few like solo speed farming builds that might want to make use of this, especially on Necromancer, where you are usually extremely cooldown hungry. So you can try to, for example, drop a Messerschmitt and take the Fragment of Destruction and have another weapon cube. Aside from this is mostly going to be used on supports, especially with this rank 3 effect, which is the second to last here, which is the Trail of Fire. So essentially you have like a Fire Walker effect, and anything with 10% or lower health will be executed, so you have like a little execution effect. So yeah, this is quite clearly like targeted as a support chart. There are some other effects, like you also heal a bit or you get some movement speed. So this is something you can maybe also stick into some speed farming setups in groups, in a support character, or maybe in T16, similar to the Shard of Hatred, you get some movement speed here. Now for the weapon shards, we have the Essence of Anguish. You've already seen this at the start. So the base effect is this cooldown and movement speed stacking effect. This works with poison damage on your weapon. So if you roll poison damage on the weapon as one of these random elements that it can have, this actually works. And it can also be stacked by poison damage from your follower's weapon. So this is actually quite useful in solo play. If you can't get a weapon for yourself that has poison damage, or some weapons simply don't roll poison damage, so you would have to roll it manually, then this can definitely help you out there. The second rank 3 effect is one where this maximum stack count for cooldown and movement speed is increased to 15, so you get a bit more out of that. And then you have this 50% increased poison damage effect, which is usually the main version here that most builds will use. So this 50% increased poison damage actually works for all damage done, as long as you have the poison damage roll on your weapon. So here you can't do it with the follower, you have to do it yourself. But on the other hand, in a group environment, you can actually apply this for your party members as well. You can actually use this on a support character, and they will increase the whole party damage by 50%. You don't actually need to have this like poison skill or poison roll on the weapon of the DPS, and this is obviously extremely powerful. If you're playing any kind of poison build like on a Necromancer or the Witch Doctor, you get this stacking effect by default, and you don't have to worry about your weapon's damage type. Here's the Remnant of Pain, which is another of those powerful weapon shards. This is rarely used in solo pushing, but there are a few builds that have that, especially the Thorns builds, because this Remnant of Pain allows you to crit with Thorns, which is otherwise almost impossible, and this is a massive damage buff to Thorns builds. So the rank 0 effect here is this critical hit chance is reduced by 15%, and attacks against incapacitated enemies are automatically critical hits. And this counts for stun, freeze, blind, charm, basically all these hard crowd control effects, and not for slow and chill. This is also an extremely good support shard again, because you can stick this on a support and you get this 50% attack speed bonus. So this is one of the 3 rank 3 effects. So you can give up to 50% attack speed to everyone. So obviously for builds that need a lot of attack speed and that scale with attack speed, like Inna's Monk, this is extremely powerful here, so you want to have that usually. Here's another version that is very similar to like a Frostburn effect. So you have 50% chance to freeze. Obviously that scales with proc coefficient, so in most cases it's not exactly 50%. And then also cold skill damage is increased to frozen targets by 20%. Nothing really crazy. I don't really see too many builds using that, but you could stick this on like a gold DH, for example, so you can play kind of similar to what you experienced in Season 24 with the Buritza Ethereal, but it will not really be used that much otherwise. And here's the last rank 3 effect, which is like essentially a bit like a speed pylon, so you knock back enemies when you have more than 50% speed bonus. This is pretty terrible, so maybe in some funny speed variations you can use that to apply like a crowd control effect with a stun, which might help you to protect your squirt's necklace, but for the most part I don't really see anyone really using that. Here's the Dregs of Lies. So this is the pet shard that basically every pet build will use. It's quite powerful. So the rank 0 effect is you deal 25% less damage and your pets deal 50% increased damage. This was actually tuned down a little bit to 25% increased damage. And also this rank 3 effect has a stacking effect that gives essentially a similar damage bonus again. So there's like a damage buff that stacks from 0 to 100, and then it stacks down again to 0, and it kind of like cycles up and down. So this was also changed to give you up to 50% damage bonus instead of up to 100% bonus. So the average is again something like 25. So you have 25% bonus and another 25% bonus. So this version of the Dregs of Lies is basically the only one you're ever gonna see used, because the others are simply terrible. Here's one that has like a cheat death ability, and spawns a shadow clone and then gives you a bunch of all res and stuff like that. On the PTR there was an exploit that made this shadow clone one-shot everything, but this has been fixed. I have confirmation of that, so you're not gonna see this. And here's another version that gives you cooldown reduction when you kill an elite. This actually works for any elite you kill, so unlike in Geom, for example, you get this on every single kill of a blue pack, on every single minion. So this can actually be quite useful in certain cases, but I don't really see that many cases of this. And lastly, here's the Stain of Sin. So this is another support shard. The rank 0 effect is this, you deal 25% less damage, and when you kill 50 enemies, you spawn a pool of blood, which looks like a huge Asmodon pool, and it increases the damage done to elites by 150% and lasts 15 seconds. So on the PTR this was bugged, and it actually gave 50% damage bonus instead of 150, and it was additive damage bonus and not multiplicative, so it was really terrible. But this might be fixed for live servers. As far as I know, this is not fixed yet, but maybe it will be. And obviously this is like a nice damage buff to have on the supports. But most of the time it depends a bit on which kind of group combo you have. You will have the Remnant of Pain for the 50% attack speed, or the Essence of Anguish with the 50% poison extra damage. For the rank 3 effect, there's an interesting one which gives you additional Rift Progress Orb when you kill an elite pack. So this is obviously extremely good, especially in T16 runs. And this works for every party member. So when you have 4 people running around this thing, you get 4 extra Progress Orbs for every blue and every yellow you kill. So you can clear rifts extremely quickly if you have a full party of that. Or even in solo, you can just stick this into your T16 setup if you don't care about any of the other effects and your build is super strong anyway. So this is actually what most T16 builds will do. I can also see this being used in something like red runs, where you just want to complete the rift as fast as possible, so you go down to something like a 70-second average or something like that, and you just ignore the potential damage gain of another 1 or 2 tiers from one of the other support shards. But yeah, that remains to be seen. The other rank 3 effect on Stain of Sin are not exactly very impactful. So here's one where the pool of blood now collects your Rift Progress Orbs. So this is basically a straight downgrade to this, because, well, in T16 you have Everrise Band anyway that does that for you, and in Greater Rifts it's not such a big deal. And here's the last rank 3 effect, where the pool also negates elite affixes. So this works as like the Wizard Black Hole Rune. Also nothing really interesting, because most of the time the elites will be dead by that point anyway, and you don't really care. So that's about it, what you need to know for the soul shards. I try to keep it as short as possible. Obviously it depends a little bit on the build you're playing and on the variation you're playing. We're gonna have all the updated Season 25 guides for all builds, for all classes, with the soul shards and whatever you need to know on Maxwell very soon. So during the next week we're gonna release that. And obviously I am also in the process of making guides right now. I've already released a few, and you can also see all the choices that we have made there in the D3 planners. Overall, the power level of the soul shards is extremely high, so compared to Season 24, pretty much every build will go at least another 5 tiers higher or so, and in some cases even more, like 10 tiers. So it's extremely good even with those last minute nerfs. So you can totally expect that we're going to be speed farming GR 150 quite early in the season, much earlier and much faster than we did in Season 24 already, and almost every single build will be able to do 150 at the very high end at some point. In any case, I wish you guys a good start into Season 25. Stay tuned for the updates. Hope you liked this video, and I'll see you guys next time.